All right. Well, welcome everyone. I'm Gary Salmon, CEO and co-founder of Black Talent Security, and we almost lost Dr. Rubenstein there for a
Oh, I'm
second,
back.
but
Technology.
technology, yeah, it called you out, right? Well, welcome, Dr. Rubenstein. I know you're. This is the second webinar we've done together. The last one was awesome. So if you missed the first one, we'll definitely get you a link so you can watch
Yeah, no, it's
the
a
intro one.
pleasure to be back. Thanks for having me back, Gary. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem at all. All right, so let's get started. So for today's agenda, we're going to be covering some really fun, unique topics. So Dr. Rubenstein kind of came up with this concept of, well, why don't we compare cybersecurity to kind of the X-ray mindset and understand why we take X-rays and why we do certain things from a security perspective. So, Dr. Rubenstein, you're going to do a great job of kind of connecting those dots for your colleagues. We'll talk about vulnerabilities. I think there's a lot of misunderstandings around what a vulnerability is and how hackers are leveraging these to attack dental practices. And then we're going to get into a proactive threat detection, right? There's some amazing technologies and really smart people out there that can leverage these technologies to identify where there's risk in a dental practice and kind of like lock and close those doors to hackers. And we'll talk about some kind of best practices around these technologies that all practices should be using. And we're also going to talk about some super cool AI technology that we've been leveraging for many years that's capable of detecting malicious activity on the practices network and actually reacting autonomously and shutting the attack down in a fraction of a second. So, we're kind of living in some really cool times with AI and seeing how effective this technology really is. And then we'll kind of close out with, hey, these are all the things you need to do to build a cyber resilient practice. So you walk away with some nice actionable items.
Yeah.
All right. So let's kick this off with your concept, which is the X-ray mindset.
Yeah. So we're very good as dentists at explaining to people why something that they're not aware of or that doesn't hurt is really important and they should pay attention to it. We have this conversation with people all the time. It doesn't hurt. Well, but we have diagnostics, we have x-rays, we have things that look behind the scenes, and hopefully our patients trust us in that sense. And cybersecurity, I mean, everything we have now is connected to computers. And basically, if we aren't having that same x-ray mindset with regard to them, we can be victimized. We can fall victim to either attacks or data loss, all kinds of things. And we need other experts, in my opinion, even when we're pretty smooth and pretty cyber aware and tech savvy, we still don't have the mental resources if we're doing a lot of dentistry also to take care of this. That's why I thought of it as, it's just like telling people they need x-rays when they don't understand why. In a very short period of time, listening to Gary and to me, you're going to understand why.
Yeah. Awesome. Right. And it goes along the lines of you can't fix what you can't see. Right. And I think the cyber world is very, very similar. Like we have these physical boxes sitting in front of us that we do things on. And we have this firewall that sits maybe on the floor, hopefully not, but probably in a closet next to your modem. Right. And it's supposed to be doing things. But how do we know those things are being done properly? Like, how do we actually look into those devices and be like, hey, is this firewall configured properly? Well, here's kind of an x-ray snapshot of that through, a vulnerability scan. And, are my employees being trained? Well, I think they are, but do I really know that? I don't know. Is there a way to track all of that? And then I think kind of where you came from, Dr. Rubenstein, the HIPAA world, I think a lot of practitioners don't realize this, but the way HIPAA is written, ultimately the doctor is responsible for his or her security, right? There's no finger pointing when bad things happen. You can't be like, well, I hired my IT company and they're responsible for that. The government and the states don't look at it that way. Is that accurate?
It is accurate to an extent. I mean, certainly there are prudent steps that we all know that we should be taking. And if you're not taking them, absolutely, you're held responsible. I mean, to a certain extent, if you're doing all the things that you should be doing correctly, just because you get compromised doesn't necessarily mean you're 100% at fault. But that's not usually what happens. Usually what happens is somebody wasn't taking all the prudent steps that they should be taking because either they weren't aware of it or they didn't have adequate help to see it. So, but it's just like anything else. we're responsible for what happens in the four walls of our office. We just are, whether it's with a patient or with our information systems.
Absolutely. All right, so let's start at what I would classify is your highest risk, right? So what we say is about 60% of all cyber risk at a practice is around your employees, right? Your doctors, your team members doing things on computers. So doing things. What do we mean by that? Well, probably the biggest risk is email. All right, you're opening emails, you're clicking on links, you're opening attachments, you're interacting with the email, potentially even giving up your username and password. Why? Because you don't understand the risk. You don't understand that, that's not a real email potentially. Or your best referral down the street is sending you an email. And why the heck would that person be sending me a malicious email? Well, maybe they're not, but the hackers gained access to their email and are sending you an email from their real account. Right. So creating awareness around this through training and education and a culture of security really helps reduce this risk dramatically. And one of the things that is really important is for you to be on top of, quote unquote, what percentage of your staff has trained in the last 12 months on cyber threats. It's so simple to do, right? You have a training program in place. We offer like automated ones that are cloud based, so employees can actually go through modules and train through a cloud technology. You can have someone come in and do cybersecurity awareness training, whatever your methodology is, but it does need to be tracked.
You mentioned clicking on things. This is something where our personal experience and what happens professionally is different. We used to just, oh, that's interesting, click on it. But to a computer, a click is a very specific type of handshake. It allows very specific permissions to do things that we might not normally be aware of, which is why it's the reason people say, well, don't click on anything. That's the reason, and we have instincts on our phone and our personal life that might be different than what we need clinically in our practices.
For sure. Right. That email that appears to be a Panorex from the OMS down the street, it's not really a Panorex, right? It's a hacker sending you a targeted email that looks like a Panorex, and Stacy at the front desk clicks on it, and Stacy actually executes the ransomware attack for the hacker, right? And these are very, very common occurrences that we see, and I think a lot of folks are like, I'm going to pick up on that. But the reality is, we know AI is so good right now at writing communications that the days of broken English and improper use of our language and grammar, that's all gone, right? Because ChatGPT can write a better email than most people can at this point. So
yeah.
we do have to address cyber risk through training. So that's a key data point you want to look at. We'll talk a little bit more about KPIs, key performance indicators, right? Keep a little running total of what employees have trained, and then also build it into a routine. As you hire new employees, before they sit down and use a computer, they need to be trained, right? Because if you have 10 employees and 9 of them are all trained and squared away, and a new employee sits down at a computer and starts reading emails or doing Google searches, and they click on things or they interact with malicious emails, doesn't matter that the 9 other people did something right with training. That person's going to be, quote unquote, the weak link. All right, so this is something that I pulled off of the FBI's LinkedIn page. The FBI posts a ton of really, really good advisories related to the latest cyber threats that are out there. And one of the things we're about to talk about is the importance of managing vulnerabilities, right? A vulnerability in its most basic form is a defect in a piece of hardware or a piece of software, think an operating system or a program, that hackers can exploit to gain access to your network, right? So your firewall runs software. The software is designed by a human. Human coders make mistakes. Hackers find these mistakes and exploit that firewall, and that firewall is like, oh, I don't need a username and password. Come in, you're authenticated. And the next thing you know, the hacker's right through your firewall and sitting on your server. Right. So in July of 2025, the FBI, CISA from Homeland Security and Health and Human Services came out with a very strong warning for healthcare entities regarding ransomware. In this case, it's an interlock ransomware. That's just the name of the gang. But look at bullet point 2. Mitigate known vulnerabilities by ensuring operating systems, software, and firmware are patched and up to date. So, if you guys have attended my prior webinars or my live events, you hear me talking about this quite a bit. In fact, for over 8 years, I've been pushing this agenda hard. You must know where you're vulnerable and you must be able to patch those vulnerabilities to prevent exploitation of your office and your data. So the FBI, and I would say in the last year or two, has been really pushing this hard as well because they know a lot of organizations are not doing this. And in fact, my organization's done hundreds of ransomware and other types of cyber intrusions. And in almost every case, the threat actors, the hackers, have used vulnerability exploitation for either initial access into the network, like through the firewall or through a computer, or once they land on the network, they exploit vulnerabilities to move around the network. And the challenge that I see right now is I'll say 95% of all dental practices have no ability whatsoever to track vulnerabilities, right? Because in fact, what I'm seeing is many IT companies aren't aware of this, right? They're just thinking, oh, well, if something gets into the network, then my antivirus software is going to stop it, which unfortunately is not the case. So vulnerability management is really, really important. So let's jump into the hacker view, right? So what is the hacker view? This is also known as your external attack surface. So basically what hackers do is they'll scan millions of IP addresses, every day. And think of an IP address as your phone number to your cell phone or to your office. It's a unique number dedicated to your modem at your office. And the hackers will scan them without your permission, right? They'll go in and they'll scan blocks of IP, so hundreds of thousands or millions of them, and your IP address may just be wrapped up in that IP block. And they scan those IP addresses, then they come across your firewall and they launch a vulnerability tool against your firewall to determine, hey, is this for instance, a sonic wall with a VPN vulnerability? And if the answer is yes, then the tool will be like, oh, look at this. I found a firewall with the Sonic Wall VPN vulnerability. Would you like me to start exploiting it? And the hacker's like, yeah, start exploiting that. Let's see if we can get in. And they'll just sit back and wait. And then they'll find hundreds of other ones. They'll start the exploitation against those firewalls, until their tool alerts them, hey, I'm in. And then from there, they're basically on the inside of your network. So my challenge to you is, with this being 40% of your risk, do you personally have visibility into your external attack surface? Now, you don't need to be technical. You should be getting reports on a weekly or monthly basis as to the status of your firewall. In fact, I would argue that things are moving so rapidly that you should actually be looking at your external attack surface on a daily basis. So, for instance, is your firewall secure? If I challenged you right now, would you be able to answer that question? Is it a yes? Is it a no? Do I have some low risk vulnerabilities on my firewall? Do I have high risk vulnerabilities? Right? These are answers as a practitioner you must have. You don't need to know the technical aspects of it, but you need to know the risk of your firewall. And what I hear a lot of doctors say is they'll say, well, my IT company does that. And I'll say, oh, well, how do you know that?
Right.
So, Dr. Rubenstein, I see
Yes.
you're shaking your head there.
Yeah. We sometimes take things for granted that we don't know for a fact. And we have people often managing our computers, our networks, and things like that. And it's easy to assume that they're taking care of aspects of it that they're not. And we need to ask. We need to find out exactly what they're doing, because whatever they're not doing, we need to make sure that either they start doing or somebody else does it for us. Because, this is beyond our instincts. We don't really know naturally what needs to get done. We have to ask. Yeah. It's a conversation. Pick up the phone, talk to your people, say, are you monitoring in this way? Are you managing actively what's going in and out of my firewall? Are you checking for this? I mean, questions. And they'll often say, well, no, we're not doing that. But if we don't ask, we don't know.
For sure. Right. And one of the things that I always say, I just got back from Orlando and I lectured about 400 practitioners. in the ortho space. And one of the questions I asked to the audience is, I said, show of hands, please. How many of you have sat down with your IT company where they've pushed a piece of paper or a document in front of you and said, hey, Dr. Mary, here are all the places that our network is vulnerable? And guess how many people raised their hand? Zero.
I'm guessing zero.
Yeah.
Okay.
Zero, right? And after I got off stage, I had all these doctors walk up to me there, and it's just like you said, Dr. Rubenstein. They're like, I didn't even know to ask that, and if it's not being actively monitored, then the answer is they're not monitoring it. That's the reality of it, right? And we know that hackers will scan the firewall. They will find the defects in the firewalls, the misconfigurations, the out-of-date operating systems on them. They will exploit them, and they will get into your network, right? So this hacker view, this external attack surface analysis that should be done on a daily basis is so critical. It's like me walking by your office and jiggling the handle on the front door of your office at 8 o'clock at night and being like, hey, Dr. Rubenstein, guess what? Your office is good. I just checked your door for you. And then tomorrow night, I walk by, turn the knob, be like, hey, Dr. Rubenstein, front door of your office is open. Someone forgot to lock the deadbolt. And you're like, oh my God, thank you so much. Let me do that right now. So that's kind of what we're talking about here is understanding where you have weaknesses in your firewalls.
And once again, the weaknesses are apparent to somebody like you. And to us, we will see something that looks perfectly normal. If you come home to go to your locked door analogy, you come home from work, everything seems normal, and the front door of your house is ajar. It's slightly open, and you don't know why. That immediately says to you, oh, maybe it's not a red alert, but there's something here I got to check out. Why is that? Yeah. That's something we will get, but these 100 other things in our system could say to somebody who's really looking at it or knows what they're looking at, well, we should check this out. That's kind of weird. Why is that like that? We wouldn't even know. We would have no idea if that was the case.
Yeah, maybe it was done on purpose, right? Kid left the house. It just didn't close the door all the way. We've all probably experienced something like that.
Maybe somebody took out the garbage or something, or maybe somebody's had a medical emergency. Maybe it could be something. Maybe somebody broke in. Maybe you don't know. But what you need to know is, we got to check that out. Mm-hmm. We got to find out why and do something about it.
Yeah. We got to close that. We got to close that loop, right? Figure out, hey, if my kid did run out the door and didn't lock the door, that's an over dinner conversation.
We got to.
And I know it sounds ridiculous, but conceptually, it's the same thing.
Same thing. It's just not what our instincts tell us.
Right. And look, a lot of times there are good intentions, meaning the IT company opened up a port on the firewall because the doctor wanted security cameras in his or her office and didn't realize by opening that port, it allowed hackers to get in. Or somehow the license on the firewall expired, and that firewall that is supposed to protect your practice and all your patients isn't receiving the security patches from SonicWall or Fortinet or whoever, the Cisco.
Right.
And now it's all out of date. You're not being patched. So hackers will find those vulnerabilities and break into your firewall. It's that straightforward. So the next thing that's, I think, really important is computers being patched. So we're gonna talk a little bit about that in the next slide here. So that's a huge issue right now. So let's talk about the inside of the network. So one of the misconceptions or misperceptions that I hear being said all the time is this: well, I don't really care if I have vulnerabilities on my computers because I have a firewall and the hackers can't get past the firewall. Right. So that mindset was kind of cool like 8-9 years ago, right? It doesn't work anymore. There is a very good reason why Adobe and Microsoft and Google and all of these big names are constantly pushing software updates to their technologies. Why? Because hackers have figured out how to exploit a defect in those technologies and gain access to your devices.
Yeah. Updates come so much more frequently than they used to. We might think, well, they're updating it to give me new features and everything. They come more frequently now, mostly because of security problems. Because of things, that's the reason you get them every week or two now, as opposed to every 6 months, maybe 5 or 10 years ago.
100%. And I think what is even more scary per se is that a lot of times these updates are not automatically applied by the IT company. So I'll give you a good example. We'll get on a new client's network and the client said, "Oh, I pay my IT company to patch my computers." Okay, that's great, amazing, right? That's something they should be doing. We run the scans through our technology and it's like, "Oh, you are missing the last 9 months of Microsoft patches on these 3 computers, but the other 9 computers, those are all patched." Well, that's a huge risk. Even one machine that's not patched could allow a threat actor to gain access to that device. And sometimes just a mistake is made, right? Someone forgot to enable something to force the patches, or the patch downloaded but it didn't install properly and it was a one and done thing. So no one has any visibility that you're missing the security patches from June, July, and August of 2025. So one of the amazing technologies that cyber companies can deploy is something called real-time internal vulnerability scanning. And I know you've been exposed to this now for quite a few months, Dr. Rubenstein.
Yes.
But conceptually, what this technology does is it wakes up every 4 hours. It quickly scans your computers, not for malicious code, but for vulnerabilities, like vulnerabilities from some of the companies that I just mentioned. And then it finds them, it risk ranks them from low risk to high risk. And the amazing part about this is it can now automatically fix the vulnerability. So let's go back to the office scenario. Like I'm walking across, I'm in your office building. I walk by your office, I jiggle the knob, find your door open. Normally, I would just call you, be like, dude, you left your door open. What's going on? Or I can say, "Hey, Mitch, guess what? I found your door open, and thanks for giving me a key. I locked the deadbolt for you, so you don't have to come back to the office. You're all set." And that's real time vulnerability scanning with patching and remediation. It identifies the problem and fixes it, almost like a self healing network, right? Because we know hackers can exploit these vulnerabilities sometimes in hours or days, right? So if you're not finding these vulnerabilities and patching them in near real time, you will have some type of cyber event at your office.
Sorry. A lot
Yeah,
of
no problem.
people are having these exact same issues. So by being the one who's prepared for them and who's mitigating them, you just will encourage the hackers to move on to somebody else. Now, hopefully, everybody will soon have this type of technology employed in that. But for now, being the one who has it or one of the ones who has it will definitely make you much less vulnerable than all the other dentists in the building around you.
Yeah, for sure. It was interesting. I was down in Vegas about 6 weeks ago. I was attending a very big cyber conference, and the group I was with, they are multi-billion-dollar organizations. So the FBI and CISA, Homeland Security, started off the conference talking about exactly what Dr. Rubenstein and I are talking about right now, vulnerabilities. Right. And they basically summarizing multiple hours of presentations, but they basically got on stage and immediately said, who has visibility into their known exploitable vulnerabilities, right? These are vulnerabilities on your firewall, on your computers that hackers actually have a hacking tool to exploit. And if you don't have visibility into these KEVs or known exploitable vulnerabilities, you're going to have a cyber event. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it, right? Everyone's saying it. Cyber experts like myself and government agencies are all saying the same thing here. You must identify this risk and mitigate it. And I know we've spent some time on this on this webinar and the previous one, but this is where it's at, right? Antivirus is not where it's at, right? You want to prevent these intrusions to begin with. Lock all the doors and windows with this type of technology, these vulnerability scanners. And then if someone smashes the window or cuts a hole through the center of your door, okay, you're going to have something react. And that's kind of your antivirus software triggering, a counterattack. So here's the next data point. How many known exploitable vulnerabilities do you have on your computers? You should be provided that data. If you don't have that data, extreme high risk. Now, do you need to know what those vulnerabilities are as a doctor? I'd probably argue no, right? That's not important. But you need to know, like, hey, how many of these vulnerabilities do I have in my environment today? How many did I have last month? And what process is in place to eliminate these known exploitable vulnerabilities? If someone can't answer that question for you, you have a lot of risk, right? And you have no visibility into your risk.
I would just add that for doctors who aren't super interested or tech savvy in the workings of their computer, sometimes this kind of technology can seem intimidating because we would say to ourselves, well, I don't know about this detail, about this vulnerability, but that's not what you need to know any more than you have a patient with, periodontal disease. The patient doesn't need to know exactly what bacteria is involved in the infection. We need to, you need somebody else who can handle that and mitigate it, but you still need to have some visibility into it so you see what's going on. But you shouldn't fear it. It's helpful.
Right.
And I'm one of those people who thought I could do it all myself until maybe 6 months or a year ago. But now seeing this type of information in a quick, view on my screen, it just makes me feel much more confident that even if I don't know what to do about something, I know who I can contact to get that answer.
Yeah, well said. This may be the first time we ever compared bacteria to cybersecurity.
Yeah,
So, I mean, we're opening up all new doors here.
yeah, but it's the level of detail you need to know. I
For
don't need to know
sure.
how to fix it or but I need to be able to see which door is open. That we need to see.
Absolutely. I agree. All right. So let's talk about proactive measures, right? We hear about like there are all these problems, on networks, end of life software, known exploitable vulnerabilities, defects in our firewalls, things like that. How do we really address those issues? So the first is kind of what I've already mentioned, this concept of real time vulnerability management. And the way this works is very, very simple. A specialized piece of software will be put on all of your computers. It's a very, very tiny application that uses around 3 to 5% of the CPU, the processing power of the computer. And it only does it for a few minutes every 4 hours. And it's designed to wake up automatically, scan the computers for vulnerabilities, and then report those vulnerabilities back to a cybersecurity company for analysis. Right. So that's kind of your visibility into your computers. For your firewalls, the same concept occurs, except it's going to be on a daily basis, right? So what this technology does is it literally launches simulated cyber attacks against your firewall to determine, hey, what's misconfigured on this device that is susceptible to an attack by a hacker, right? And then that data is processed and presented back to the practice and the IT resources. These are two things that have to be done, right? And actually, if you look at some of the proposed guidance from the Office for Civil Rights, Health and Human Services, they're now recommending vulnerability management and things like that. Cyber training, we kind of touched on this already, so I'm not going to go into much more detail, but you have to do this, right? So funny, but not funny. At my presentation on Saturday, show of hands, how many of you conduct cybersecurity awareness training for your practices? I did get a couple of hands, so that was way better than my first question. And then I said, how many of you are aware that training is required under federal law as part of being HIPAA compliant? And it was literally crickets. And it was kind of the same thing again. I had practice administrators walking up to me and be like, oh my God, I do OSHA and I'm responsible for all sexual harassment and all this stuff. I had no idea. Right. And I said, look, you're probably more likely, to have some type of cyber event than, a sexual harassment claim or, an OSHA issue. Like, this is something that's easy to fix. So
that's interesting. I teach a lot of courses on HIPAA compliance. And when I ask that question, many hands go up, but that's a group of people who are already taking a course. In your case, the level of awareness might not be that. You do need to train on this. And it's not just, even if you don't care about security, there's a regulation. You must provide cybersecurity, HIPAA awareness, and training yearly. It's got to be something at least once a year. Otherwise, even if you have no attack on your system, you're still out of compliance.
Right. And even if it's not a ransomware attack, 'cause everyone's like ransomware, right? It's financial fraud, crypto fraud, tech fraud, like all these things that, well, maybe it doesn't impact your patients directly, but all of a sudden someone gained access to your bank account and emptied your business checking account or your stock portfolio or crypto, right? Crypto jacking is a big problem right now where the hackers gaining access to people's Bitcoin wallets, Coinbase, things like that.
Right.
So these are all steps that, can help prevent that type of fraud. And unfortunately, with some of the ones that I just mentioned, you're not getting your money back. It's going to be long gone before you even realize. Um, the next thing is penetration testing. This, in our world, the cyber world, is really the gold standard, right? This is a test that is performed by a cybersecurity company that employs ethical hackers, and their role is to assume the job of a cyber criminal, right? And they're going to attempt to break into your practice. So they're going to use the same techniques and tools that a real hacker would use, but they're using it for good reasons and good purposes. And then if there are positive findings, then there's a meeting held between the practice and the IT resources explaining the findings, but more importantly, how to mitigate the findings, right? How to eliminate that risk. So that should be done at least once a year. I mean, we do it twice per year, every 6 months for our clients, but I believe once a year is sufficient. But obviously, the more you can do it, the better. So this is also a really cool technology that we've been leveraging for about a year now. It's AI-based email security. So we actually see more email-based attacks than ransomware this year, or have seen, I should say. And one of the challenges with email attacks, meaning the hackers get into your email account and take it over and control it and usually lock you out and everyone in your practice. Dr. Rubenstein, you've been in practice for a long time, right?
Yeah.
Many practitioners have been in practice for a long time. There's a lot of information in emails, and sometimes more information than some practice management systems, depending on what goes in there.
Yeah.
When they gain access to these email systems, it's not a good situation, from a compliance and regulatory perspective. And what's even worse is the PR issue. Yep, the PR problem. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's a perception problem in addition to an actual problem. I was just going to say, yeah.
Yeah, for sure, right? And then what happens is the hackers, once they get into your email account for the office, or if you're using your personal email account for the office as well, they're going to read all of your personal emails, all your work emails. They're going to look at your contact list. They're going to start emailing, all your friends, family, colleagues, things like that. They're going to start sending them malicious emails. And those people are going to look at it and be like, oh, this is from my friend, my cousin, my colleague down the street. It's probably something cool he or she wants me to download, and they click on it and then they get attacked. So
this is again one reason not to mix business and pleasure, as I say. I mean, if you still have, if your email address is still like, drbob@aol.com, and it's the same one that you use for all your personal stuff, your chances of getting compromised, not only in your personal life, which is bad, but in your professional life goes way, way up.
For sure. Yeah, look, and if you are then an unfortunate victim of a class action lawsuit by your patients against you, guess what? The plaintiff's attorneys are going to do? They're going to subpoena your email account, right? And then they're going to go through every single email. And
Yeah.
I guess there's things in there you don't want a law firm reading. So this email security is amazing technology. It leverages a couple of really interesting concepts. The first is obviously AI, right? Everything's AI right now. But what it does is it learns the senders and receivers' writing styles. So it has the capability of saying, whoa, hold on a second. I've been monitoring Dr. Rubenstein's emails for, a month now. This isn't his writing style. I don't believe, he sent this, or an incoming email, right? From an ortho down the street. So it does that. It also inspects the links in an email, and it inspects the attachments in an email to try and determine if they're malicious, or they have malicious intent, or they're trying to harvest usernames and passwords. And one of the most interesting things it does is it leverages crowdsourcing. So for instance, we have thousands of mailboxes that we secure. Let's just say that Dr. Rubenstein gets into his office at 6 a.m. on a Monday morning, starts looking at his emails, and he's like, whoa, this email slipped by the AI engine. This is definitely malicious. He can flag it as malicious. It'll go to a group of security engineers at the cyber company. They'll review it and be like, oh, yeah, high five, Dr. Rubenstein. Definitely you caught it, right?
Right.
They'll flag it as known malicious, and it will then query every single inbox and rip that email out of all those other inboxes. So he's got colleagues out in California that leverage the same technology. At 3 o'clock in the morning, they're probably not on their email, I would hope. But at 3 o'clock in the morning, those emails are getting instantly ripped out of their inboxes, and they wouldn't even have had the opportunity to see a potential malicious email.
Yeah.
So you don't have just a handful of network defenders; you have thousands of them, right? That have been trained and are know how to flag these things as malicious. It is working amazingly well. It's very, very cool technology.
This is truly an amazing leap forward, because it's not only a factor of how sophisticated is the company managing my security, but it's also the fact that they can now gather huge amounts of data from other practices that they work with and kind of see as a whole, what's going on everywhere, and determine whether it's a real, because you don't want to be alerted for every little thing either. You want to be drill in on what's a real threat. This, as I've seen it so far, it's new, but I mean, it looks like it's a real game changer.
It really is, for sure, right? I think this is way above what Microsoft is doing, way above what Google is doing from a threat prevention perspective. And the proof's in the pudding, right? Most people have some type of defensive email security, and the fact that this technology is picking up things that miss those filters, just kind of validates the effectiveness of this, and the crowdsourcing, right? Very, very cool. The next is credential based, US based security engineers. So one of the challenges that I see is this: what if I go to Henry Schein's website and order a whole bunch of dental instruments and a chair and set it up in my house? I'm a dentist, right? I mean, sure. I watched my dad growing up, right? So,
Yeah,
yeah, I'm good,
not that
right? But
hard.
that's not hard. Yeah. Who needs dental school anymore, right? um, that's what YouTube's for. Um, but in all seriousness, this is unfortunately what's happening in the cyber world, right? There's a lot of Kool-Aid drinking and cool tools out there that are being purchased with good intention from IT companies, but they're not being managed properly. They're not being implemented properly. And then, the folks that say they're doing security, they have no credentials behind their name per se. So whenever you're talking to an organization that supposedly does security, a question should be posed, which is, how many CISPs do you have? Right? These are board certified, credentialed security engineers from a nonprofit organization, right? This isn't, oh, I paid Microsoft $200, so now I'm certified. This is a legit, very difficult program to get through, and be certified on. So these are real security engineers. So if the answer is like, oh, we don't have any of those folks, you got to pause for a second and be like, okay, why are you providing me with security? You don't have any credentialed security people. Just because they've been doing IT for 10, 15, 20 years, very different, right? They're great, I'm sure, at doing IT, but it's a very, very different swim lane, security versus IT.
Yeah, credentials are important to check. I mean, because to us as dentists, anybody who knows more than us will seem like an expert to us, or can make themselves seem superficially like an expert. Until you check the credentials, you don't really know what education they've had, what they've been through in order to become that expert that they're saying they are.
Yeah, it was really interesting. I had an orthodontist talk to me on Saturday, and she's like, "Oh, I've seen you lecture at the last 3 meetings, and I was texting my IT guy, at your first lecture, then actually sat down with him, and she said, I feel stupid. He literally gaslights me to make me feel stupid." And I'm like, yeah, but that's not right. Like, you should be able to have, a human conversation where he explains things to you so you don't feel that way. And she's like, I'm done with that. She's like, I'm the more I hear you speak about this, the more I realize, why security is so important. And he just tells me, like, I take care of your practice. Don't worry about this. You treat your patients. That's your job. This is my job. And he never wants to explain anything.
Right.
You know?
I never really thought about that specifically. That is, in fact, a tremendous warning sign. Any expert your expert should want you to know more. Your expert, my expert that I have protecting my computer, they should want me to know as much as possible, not less. That's
right.
I like that. I'm going to remember that. I learned something today. Look at that.
Yeah, for sure. We talked about this autonomous patching and remediation, so I'm not going to get into that. But another thing that is really important, and Dr. Rubenstein has known this for a very long time, being a HIPAA expert, is the necessity for these security assessments, security risk assessments, HIPAA assessments, things like that.
Yeah.
They can also be performed not only on the network, but they can also be performed on email solutions like Microsoft 365, Google Workspace. I think one of the big misunderstandings is that because these are big companies, Microsoft and Google, they're going to give you a platform and magically, right, it's going to be secure.
That's
And unfortunately, that's just not the case, right? Someone who knows what they're doing needs to go in there and properly configure these email systems, right? And sometimes we're doing multiple email system breaches a week, get hired by law firms and victims themselves and insurance carriers to do these. And you go in there and you're just horrified. You're like, oh my God, literally someone just took your money and turned this thing on and never configured it from a security perspective.
right.
And that's a huge challenge. And you know what? It's a gut punch because you look at this doctor and you're like, oh, this was so easily preventable, right? This wasn't some
Right.
crazy attack that no one has ever
Right.
seen, and there was no way to defend against it.
Which is, I think the majority of things that happen, are not the crazy new attack that no one's ever seen before, but they're typical things that get exploited all the time that many of us just aren't prepared for or aren't set up to protect ourselves from.
Exactly. It goes back to locking the door. If you lock the door, the
Right.
guy would have kicked on the door and just gone to the next house. I mean,
Right.
it sounds ridiculous, but that's conceptually how it works.
Yeah.
All right, so reactive. So once again, we got to kind of break this wall down here. What I see in the dental technology space is most IT companies, I'll go with a high 95% again, are saying, well, we have really good antivirus software on your computer. Okay. So that's no different than me sitting in my house, leaving my doors and windows open with a sign on my lawn, be like, dude, break in. Right. And then all of a sudden, a guy's walking around my house, taking the stuff out of my house. Why? Because I'm relying on something happening when that guy comes in. Maybe it's my German Shepherd that I know, dude, if someone comes into my house, Dr. Rubenstein, that German Shepherd is going to tear after him. And that guy's running, as fast out of the house as possible. Right. And I always use this joke, so I'll use it again. But then he flips the dog a hot dog and it's all good. Right. They're best friends. So, and I think this is so important, right? Leveraging this good technology, but someone's already beaten your outer defenses. Someone is walking around in your dental office and they're potentially doing bad things. So proactive means they're not getting into my office. Reactive means, all right, something failed somehow. The guy rappelled through the ceiling and I didn't have any, way to protect that. He cut through the floor of the doctor above me and came in. I'm being crazy, but conceptually that's it. So now I'm going to rely on, a product like SentinelOne or CrowdStrike, which are the two premier products out there, to launch a counterattack against that cyber event. So these are the two products that we're really recommending. We are a SentinelOne shop. We have 25,000 computers in the dental space running SentinelOne. It's really, really powerful tech that is capable of stopping most attacks. Understand there's nothing in the world right now that will stop everything. But these are reacting to bad things that have made it through your firewall and onto your computers. The next thing is 24/7 management. So Dr. Rubenstein and I have talked about this quite a bit. Most ransomware attacks and theft of patient data don't occur on a Wednesday morning or at lunch. They're happening Friday after hours into Monday morning before anyone walks in the office. So that block of time. And it's a very simple theory. Most hackers know that businesses don't have IT resources working over the weekend. So you may have good antivirus software, but Saturday morning, the antivirus software is triggering because it's detecting something malicious. It's sending alerts out to your IT company. No one's responding. They'll get those alerts Monday morning when they get into the office, and either they're going to know it first or you're going to know it when you see ransom notes on your screen. So it must be managed 24/7. That's literally eyes on glass. So that's a phrase we hear a lot in the cyber world. Literally, folks sitting in front of computers being alerted, hey, Dr. Rubenstein's office is under attack at 3:37, Saturday morning. And then they're leveraging the AI technology for counter response. And then they're also leveraging their own human knowledge to stop the attack or minimize the damage.
Yeah.
So really important. Configured properly. This was really eye-opening for me. About a year and a half ago, we did a ransomware attack on a pediatric group. in the Mid-Atlantic region. And when we got in there, they were leveraging one of these two mentioned security products above. And for me, it was like, oh my God, how the heck did they beat that? Like that's the tier one top shelf product. The hackers got around it, and it was a gut punch. And then we slowly started chatting with the IT resource and like, guys, like help us understand, like this technology should have detected that and either instantly stopped it or stopped it within a couple of seconds. So they're like, oh, well, we're still trying to figure it out. We're looking into it. And a couple days into it, once we got into the antivirus technology, we saw that they turned a very important setting off. So we asked them, we're like, hey guys, why did you turn this setting off? They're like, oh, well, the practice was complaining that, it was interfering with their ability to take x-rays at a couple locations. And the CEO of the group was like, you did what? Did you get our approval for that? And if it was interfering, why didn't you fix it so it stopped interfering? And it just slowly spiraled out of control. And that one setting cost that group about $2.8 million. So it's got to be managed properly. It goes back to the dental instruments. You got to know how to use a dental instrument properly, right?
Right. And remember, when you request something, make sure you're inquisitive enough as to whether it might have some other effect elsewhere in your, if it's something like, because sometimes it shouldn't happen this way, but sometimes you ask your IT company and you say there's a problem, and could you switch this around so I can do this instead? They'll just do it. If you have backup as far as security analysis, you have your system being scanned regularly. If they do something like that, you'll find out a lot quicker than if they just did it and nobody knew about it.
Right. And that's why, to your point, it's good to ask questions, right? Have the general understanding, the general knowledge, be like, okay, that doesn't sound right. So you're telling me my antivirus software is stopping me from taking x-rays. The first question is why and how can we fix that? Right? Can we do something to tell the antivirus software, okay, when you see DEXA software load, don't block it, right? It's almost that simple. So one of the things that we've seen over the years of leveraging this AI is we've built an entire ecosystem around all of these dental practice management systems and imaging systems to the point where we know exactly what will and what won't cause false positives with the AI. And we've tuned it so much that practices rarely, if ever, have any problems with this technology. The inverse happens as well, where, these are great products. SentinelOne and CrowdStrike are amazing. They'll get dropped on someone's network. They're not configured properly. They'll constantly annoy the practice by shutting stuff down. And eventually, the IT company just turns the dial down. Oh, still annoying. Oh, turn it down more. Right. So you shut off the airbags. You shut off the anti-lock braking system. Right. The doors don't lock anymore. You didn't put your seatbelt on. So, it becomes ineffective. All right. So I think the need for visibility is a great way to kind of wrap this up here. This is an example of the dashboard that we leverage and the practices leverage. Dr. Rubenstein has kind of become intimately involved with this, and it's really designed to help clinicians, practice administrators to understand their cyber risk without really being too technical. So I know, Dr. Rubenstein, if you want to add anything.
So this view, when I first saw it, seemed a little intimidating, but then, since you guys generally have, readily available to conference on anything, and I have I'll make a call and somebody will explain to me which 2 or 3 things on this screen I should pay attention to, and which things I don't have to worry about because you guys will let me know if there's an issue. But it's really a very quick way of seeing what's going on, and you can look at it over time. Not just today. So it'll see what progress is being made. If there's a vulnerability that wasn't there before, or if there's now fewer than there were before, you can kind of see over time what's going on in your system. And I don't spend a ton of time looking at this, frankly, which is the way it's supposed to be, but enough that, I have a lot more confidence that I know what's going on, under the hood, than I used to. And I used to feel like I was very technologically savvy with this stuff. And I think, 5 or 10 years ago, maybe I was, but now it's just well beyond my level of sophistication, even as somebody who's, interested in networking, cybersecurity, that kind of stuff, even if I did understand it, this would make it so much quicker, to just quickly see what's going on and what I need to pay attention to. It's a nicely designed dashboard.
Oh, thank you. And I think that you nailed it, right? It's quick visibility. So one of the things we created, which is right in the center of the screen, that ring, is the cyber risk rating. So one of our larger enterprise clients came to us a couple of years ago, and they're like, "All right, you have so much data. Just tell me where I am from a cybersecurity perspective. Do I suck? Or are we doing pretty good?" Right? All right. Okay. We have so much telemetry and so much data coming in from your network that we can do that for you. So we came up with this concept of the cyber risk rating. Think of it as a FICO score for cyber. And just like your FICO score, it tells you, like, hey, are you maxing out your credit cards? Like, what percentage of, your income to debt ratio do you have? Are you late paying? Things like that. Conceptually, the same thing with cyber. So we're looking at, your employees. Are they training? Are they not training? Are they passing? Are they failing the courses? We're looking at your firewalls. Are they secure? Are they not secure? If they're not secure, how badly are they? How bad are they from a security perspective? How many vulnerabilities do you have on your computers? How many known exploitable vulnerabilities do you have? And it takes all this telemetry and it calculates the risk rating. So you can come in here and be like, all right, I got 23 out of 100. I'm good, right? My IT company's doing a good job. My security firm's doing a good job. I can move on. Maybe you're a little bit more interested. Okay, how's my data trending over the last 12 months?
Yeah.
All right. You're typically, if you're doing a good job, you're going to see, the trending data go down a little bit, but there's always going to be peaks and valleys, because next week Microsoft's going to have 50 vulnerabilities and Google's going to have 10, and there's going to be hundreds or thousands of them across your network. So you want to see how
changes so quickly. It's never going to be perfect. It's never going to be a zero. It's never going to be 100%. The question is, what is it compared to what it was last week or last month? And, what is it compared to what, is typically seen as a decent and effective, security posture? That is much more effective than just saying, oh, the number is what is the number?
Right.
What does that mean relative to everything else?
Yeah. Even ask your IT company, what's my cyber risk rating right now, and see what they come back with, right? How do they quantify that? It's almost impossible at this point without some serious math behind it.
Right.
And then I think from a compliance and regulatory perspective, God forbid you have an event, to be able to show the investigators and the auditors, hey, listen, we had eyes on this. We were doing everything conceivably possible.
Yeah.
That immediately changes the discussion, right? When an investigator comes in here and is like, oh, you started at an average of 20 high risk vulnerabilities per device 6 months ago, and now you're down to 9.
Right.
Okay. You guys had full visibility into this. All right. We realize that, unfortunately, things just happen sometimes that are beyond your control. Maybe make a couple tweaks here and case closed. And I hate to make it so simple, but that's the type of thing they want to see. Like, did you have visibility into your risk, and how are you managing your risk?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. All right. So let's wrap up here. And I know you got to go see some patients.
Hence our discussion of, I need people to look at stuff that I don't, but this hour is very important. I mean, I always, even though I'm one of the I'm always getting something out of this.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, kind of wrap up slide. One of the big things is the separation of duties between IT and cyber. And I do have the honor and pleasure of lecturing with some of the largest healthcare law firms in the country, sometimes in front of hundreds of people. And one of the things that a lot of these attorneys are now saying is, you have to separate this, right? From a compliance, I shouldn't say that, from a best practices perspective, this is the way to go, right? You can't have the fox guarding the hen house with IT doing all of it, right? So you have the true division of labor. We talked a lot about preventative services, training, and AI email security, and vulnerability scanning and pen testing. Those are all best practices. Those are kind of, the gold standard, and then in your world, standard of care, right? That's what's necessary. And then the reactive security measures, having good AI tools that can identify and potentially block or stop the attack. And then also, something I didn't mention, the ability to do a forensics and analyze the attack. Unfortunately, what I've seen happen in the past with some of these ransomware attacks is the antivirus stopped something today. It wasn't thoroughly investigated, and 2 weeks from now, they have a full-blown ransomware attack. Because someone started the the burning, 2 weeks ago, and no one smelled the smoke or saw the fire, right? And then all of a sudden, it turned into an inferno. Be able to visualize and identify risk. I think that's everything we're talking about today, right? If you don't have visibility into this risk, you can't fix the problem, right? I know everyone wants to try and control things in life, and I think that's fine, but you can't control something you can't see or visualize or
For sure.
have any knowledge about. The next is a big one. Be responsible for your security. I tell all doctors this: you have to control your own destiny here, right? These types of events are going to be life-changing. A ransomware event is life-changing, right? You're the victim of a crime. It becomes very personal, right? It becomes a compliance and regulatory headache for you and a financial burden. These types of technologies and this type of visibility can help mitigate, right, that risk. Nothing ever goes to zero, as Dr. Rubenstein said earlier, but getting as far down on that risk scale as possible is really critical. And understanding your cyber risk, so you have clear visibility into what I need to do and who I need to question. Why is my cyber risk rating 30% higher this month? What's going on? Oh, well, thank you for asking, Dr. Rubenstein, but we made a mistake and somehow your firewall software expired, but we fixed that. Okay, no problem. We had visibility into it, we addressed it, good to go.
And now I know.
Yeah. Right. We know stuff happens, but being able to catch it in time is where it's so critical, or why it's so critical. Anyway, I think that's it, actually. So look at that. 2 minutes to spare.
Amazing. Look at that. Yeah, no, this is, this whole recap of the functions and especially the separation of powers, as I like to call it, between IT and security. Number one, nobody's good at everything. And number two, it's nice to have everybody, if it's a healthy relationship, everybody's backing each other up, and helping each other out, which is the way it works. In my case, it just makes everybody safer, more secure. I think that's the way to go, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's truly a kumbaya, right, type thing, right? We're all working together for the same cause. Let's protect the doctors. Let's protect their team and their patient records. Most important.
Protect the doctors. That's absolutely. That's how we protect the doctors.
It's all about.
That's we need to be protected.
Save me. Yeah. Anyway, any closing thoughts?
No, I just it was eye-opening for me, as always. Always I get something new. As many times as we've talked, I always get something new from this, and it was a pleasure, and I appreciate you having me on to do it. I think it's one of the most important things that we don't pay enough attention to.
Yeah, mutual. I agree with you wholeheartedly. So, well, thanks, Dr. Rubenstein. It's always a pleasure and honor to be around you, and thanks for all your
right back at you. I appreciate it too. Thanks, Gary. Right. And bye, everybody. Hope you enjoyed it. Okay.
How can you minimize cyber risk if you lack visibility into security metrics? Critical business decisions need to be based on verified data, not assumptions or feelings. Be confident that you're always protected with the all-new Eagle Eye, providing total visibility and control over your organization's security posture, and empowering everyone from executives to IT professionals to mitigate cyber risk. Eagle Eye simplifies your security data, making it easy to see gaps. Assess your cyber risk rating across the entire organization or by each location. View risk level trends over time, benchmark against other businesses, and dive deeper into all data points comprising your total risk potential. From software and hardware vulnerabilities, detected threats and attacks, to firewall misconfigurations and more, Eagle Eye has you covered with the KPIs and actionable insights necessary to elevate security. Meet compliance standards with employee cybersecurity awareness training and test comprehension levels with simulated phishing emails. Stop wasting time and resources on ineffective security measures and start strategically minimizing cyber risk within your business. Your current security solution cannot predict a cyber attack, but Eagle Eye can.